He signed his name on a piece of paper he thought was a job contract. He didn't know it was a death warrant for the next 12 years of his life. A free man, a husband, a father of 3, a violinist who could make a room full of strangers weep with a single song. And then, he woke up in chains. No name, no family, no freedom, just a number and a whip. This is not fiction. This really happened to a real man. In America, in 1841, his name was Solomon Northup, and what he survived would later shock the entire world. Before the chains, before the whip, before any of it, Solomon Northup was simply a happy man. He was born free around 1808 in the state of New York. Not enslaved, not owned, born a citizen with the same rights on paper as any white man around him, in a country that, at the very same moment, held nearly 2.5 million black men, women, and children in bondage a few hundred miles south. Solomon grew up working the land with his father, a formerly enslaved man who had earned his own freedom. He learned to read. He learned to farm. And most of all, he learned to play the violin. Not just play it, feel it. By the time Solomon was a grown man, he had a wife and 3 children, Elizabeth, Margaret, and Alonzo. He worked odd jobs around Saratoga Springs, New York, farming in the summer, driving rafts down the river, and in the evenings, fiddling at dances and parties for extra money. He was, by every account, respected, known, liked. Picture it for a second. A warm evening in upstate New York, lanterns glowing along a porch, neighbors laughing, and in the middle of it all, Solomon Northup, bow in hand, filling the night air with music. That was his world. A small, ordinary, beautiful life. He had no idea it was about to be stolen from him. In March of 1841, 2 men rode into Saratoga Springs. They introduced themselves as Merrill Brown and Abram Hamilton. Well-dressed, well-spoken, charming, even. They told Solomon they worked for a traveling circus, and they needed a skilled violinist for a short tour. The pay was good, the job was simple, and it wouldn't take long. Solomon had no reason to distrust them. Why would he? He was a free man, with free papers to prove it, standing on free soil. He agreed to travel with them, first to New York City, then further south to Washington, D.C. Here's the detail that should make your stomach drop. Before crossing into the South, one of the men actually suggested Solomon get official documentation proving his freedom just to be safe. So Solomon did. He carried those papers with him. Proof, in ink, that he belonged to no one. It wouldn't matter. Not one bit. Because in Washington, the 2 men invited him to dinner. And that dinner was drugged. Solomon later described it simply. He felt sick. His head grew heavy. The room began to spin. And then nothing. Darkness. When he opened his eyes again, he wasn't in a hotel room anymore. He was in a cell. Chained. Alone. In the dark. He called out. No one answered. He reached for his pocket, for the freedom papers he'd so carefully secured. They were gone. Stolen, along with everything else that proved who he was. Within days, a slave trader named James H. Sit with that for a moment. A free American citizen, kidnapped in the shadow of the very government meant to protect him and shipped south like cargo. The journey down the coast, through the Chesapeake, around Florida, and into the Gulf took weeks. Men and women packed below deck. Heat, sickness, grief pressing down on every single soul aboard. Solomon later wrote about lying in that dark hold, listening to the groaning of the ship's timbers, wondering if his wife would ever learn what had happened to him, or if he would simply vanish from the earth and from her memory without a trace. In New Orleans, he was sold, stripped, inspected, priced, like livestock, by a trader named Theophilus Freeman. And here is where the story turns even darker. Solomon tried, once more, to tell the truth, to explain he was free. Freeman's warning was ice cold. Say that again, he told him, and you'll wish you hadn't. Solomon understood. Silence wasn't just survival anymore. It was the only thing keeping him alive. He was sold to a plantation owner named William Ford in Louisiana. His new life, 12 years of it, was about to begin. Ford, by the accounts of the time, was considered a kind master, which, in the reality of slavery, meant only that the daily violence was slightly less constant. Solomon impressed Ford almost immediately. He was resourceful, intelligent. He designed a faster way to transport lumber by raft, saving Ford enormous amounts of money. For a moment, it might have almost felt survivable, but the moment didn't last. Ford fell into debt, and Solomon was sold again, this time to a man named John Tibiatz. Tibiatz was cruelty with no talent for restraint. He beat Solomon over the smallest imagined offense. Once, over a dispute about nails, Tibiatz came at Solomon with an axe. Solomon, in a moment of pure desperation, fought back. He overpowered Tibiatz and beat him in return. For an enslaved man, in that time and place, striking back at a white man wasn't just dangerous. It was a crime punishable by death. Solomon ran, not toward freedom. There was nowhere to run to, but into a swamp filled with snakes and alligators, simply to survive the night. He later called it one of the worst nights of his life. And remember, this was a man who had already survived being drugged, chained, and sold. Eventually, he was sold a final time to a man named Edwin Epps. If Ford was the closest thing to mercy in this story, Epps was the opposite. Epps ran a cotton plantation with a quota system. Every enslaved person had a daily picking weight. Fall short, and you were whipped. No excuses, no mercy. Solomon watched and endured unimaginable cruelty for 10 years under Epps. He watched a woman named Patsy, one of the most skilled cotton pickers on the plantation, suffer horrifically at Epps' hands, caught in a nightmare of jealousy and abuse from both Epps and his wife. Solomon later wrote about Patsy with a tenderness that still aches on the page. He called her the queen of the field, a woman broken not by her own failures, but by the cruelty of people who owned her body, but never her spirit. Through it all, Solomon held on to one secret weapon, his violin. Epps, like Ford before him, discovered Solomon could play and had him perform at parties for other plantation owners. It was, cruelly, both his torment and his lifeline. The very talent that once brought him joy in Saratoga Springs now kept him alive in bondage. A small, painful reminder of exactly who he used to be. For 12 years, Solomon Northup lived as Platt. 12 years of sunrise to sunset labor, in fields that stretched further than a man could see, under a heat that never let up. 12 years without his wife, without his children. 12 years wondering if anyone, anywhere, was even still looking for him. Here's what almost nobody in that field knew. Solomon could read and write. For 12 years, it had been the most dangerous secret he possessed, because in the Deep South, literacy in an enslaved person was treated as a threat. In the summer of 1852, a traveling carpenter from Canada, a man named Samuel Bass, came to work on the Epps plantation. Bass was an outspoken abolitionist, a rare and dangerous thing to be out loud in Louisiana. Solomon studied him for weeks, listened to him speak, watched how he treated the enslaved people around him, and finally, he took the single greatest risk of. Solomon dictated a letter. Bass wrote it and secretly mailed it north to Saratoga Springs, New York, addressed to people who might remember the name Solomon Northup. Then he waited. Imagine that waiting. Every single day, working the same fields, under the same sun, not knowing if that letter had even survived the journey, not knowing if anyone still remembered him, not knowing if this was hope or one final cruelty. Weeks passed, and then, on a January day in 1853, a wagon arrived at the Epps plantation. Inside it was a local sheriff and a man named Henry Northup, a lawyer, and the son of the family that had once employed Solomon's father. Solomon's letter had reached New York, under a New York law, specifically passed years earlier to help recover free citizens who had been kidnapped into slavery. Henry Northup had legal standing to intervene. But there was a problem. Solomon Northup no longer existed on paper. For 12 years, he had only been Platt. The sheriff turned to Solomon and asked him a question meant to prove his identity beyond doubt, something only the real Solomon Northup could answer. Solomon didn't hesitate. He spoke the name of the local schoolteacher who had once taught him, back in Saratoga Springs, more than a decade earlier. The answer matched. In that single moment, 12 years of forced silence, 12 years of being erased, 12 years of being Platt, ended. Edwin Epps fought the legal process. He didn't want to let Solomon go, but New York law and Henry Northup's documentation left him no room to argue. On January the 3rd, 1853, Solomon Northup walked off that plantation. A free man again. Picture the road north. Picture a man who has aged 12 years in body and in soul, sitting on a train, watching the landscape of his captivity disappear behind him. Picture him walking, finally, back into Saratoga Springs. His wife, Anne, was still there, waiting, still raising their children, still holding on to whatever fragments of hope she had left. His son Alonzo barely remembered his father's face. There is no known written account of the exact words spoken in that reunion. Some things are too large for language, and this may be one of them. But we do know this. After 12 years of silence, of grief, of not knowing whether her husband was alive or dead in some distant field, and Northup got him back, Solomon didn't stay silent. Within months of his return, he worked with a writer to put his story onto paper. In 1853, his memoir, 12 Years a Slave, was published. It sold thousands of copies within its first month. It became one of the most detailed, first-person accounts of American slavery ever recorded, written by a man who had lived free, been stolen, and lived to describe both worlds with devastating clarity. He testified. He spoke publicly. He became, for a time, one of the most powerful voices in the growing abolitionist movement at the exact moment America was hurtling towards civil war. And then, quietly, mysteriously, historical records of Solomon Northup simply stop. No confirmed record of his death. No confirmed grave. A man who survived 12 years of slavery to tell his story to the world vanished a second time, this time into the fog of history itself. Solomon Northup got his freedom back. But no book, no reunion, no justice system ever gave him back those 12 years. 12 years his children grew up without him. 12 years his violin played someone else's songs, in someone else's house, for someone else's profit, and for every Solomon Northup whose letter reached the right hands. Historians remind us there were countless others whose letters never did. Men and women who lived and died as someone else's plat, and whose real names we will simply never know. Solomon Northup's story didn't end slavery, but it made it impossible for anyone who read it to pretend they didn't know exactly what it cost. If this story moved you, his book still exists. His words still exist. And maybe,